All right, welcome everybody to our guest blogging broadcast. So, in tonight's portion of our series of guest blogging, we're going to talk about essentially pitching your your guest blog idea to a potential partner. And I've written some notes here just so you guys have something to reference while we're talking about this. So, I want to start with when should I approach someone about blogging or guest blogging? Is there an ideal time? Is there a golden time to approach somebody? And there really isn't, but I've left you a few notes here. I didn't write this one down first, but let me just say this first. The best time to do it is after you've cultivated a little bit of a relationship with your potential guest blog post partner. It is not wise to try to pitch somebody out of the blue. How many of you guys have ever gotten a phone call from a telemarketer out of the blue for something you didn't ask for and probably something you didn't need? And they get you on the phone and they're quickly trying to get you into this pitch, and you don't even know who this person is, nor do you care because they're interrupting you during dinner, right? Nobody likes that. Nobody likes a cold call. In our neighborhood right now, we get a lot of those, we get pest control people. They're constantly knocking on our door trying to sell us pest control services. Drives us crazy because they always come at the wrong times. Nobody likes an unsolicited sales pitch. People don't mind a sales pitch coming from somebody that they've already got a relationship with. So, although I didn't write this down, I think the biggest part of your notes right now should be that the best time is after you've cultivated that relationship. Okay? Now there's an argument to be made. If there's lots of blogs in your niche or your space, you could go out there and bulk email all of them, and you'd probably get a really low response rate and you wouldn't get a lot of opportunities. It's much better to cultivate the relationship first, okay? All right, but let's look at these other items here. So in terms of when, first one, after getting mentioned in social media, okay? So I guess that means that if you've been cultivating a relationship with your potential partner, sometimes as part of that process, you may go out and retweet one of their latest articles, or maybe post about it on Facebook, or mention them on Instagram, or whatever the case may be. And they may reciprocate that at some point, and they may repost one of your blog posts or what have you. But that's one way to confirm that a relationship is there. Even though maybe you've never spoken, at least you know that they're aware of your blog and your site and your brand. And that might be a good time to reach out and see if you can cultivate some kind of an opportunity to do a post on their blog. Second one here, after getting mentioned in a blog post, you'll notice sometimes that when people are writing content and creating blog posts, they'll reference via a link an article, maybe an article that you wrote on your site. And if you ever get referenced in a blog post, we can at least feel like they know who we are, they know our brand, and it might be a good opportunity to suggest a guest post, right? Sometimes, here's the third one right here, sometimes you'll see that blogs will actually ask for guest posts. Believe it or not, especially newer blogs, maybe not so much your more aged veteran blogs. Newer blogs, though, might on occasion write something in an article saying, hey, by the way, we do accept guest posts. We're interested in them if you've got good content. So if you ever see that, that's a good time, even if you don't really have much of a relationship. Fourth one, if the prospective blog has recently published a guest post, which would indicate to you that they probably are accepting more, that's a good time to reach out as well. Or this last one right here, or anytime, but I'm going to preface this anytime comment here with the idea that the best time is after you've got a relationship. I think we've driven that point home plenty already tonight. So if you took the next 3 or 4 weeks and you never actually pitched anybody, you just prepped the whole time, that would be great, because then in your next month, after you've got those relationships, maybe then you can actually go through and pitch these companies. Okay, let's scroll down here. Now, in terms of just some best practices, and what I mean by best practices is when you are going to try to contact the blog owner, email them, message them. Here are just some best practices when participating in that. Number one, read the guidelines for a guest post before you solicit the person. Now, I've got with me here guidelines from two separate blogs, okay? And I'll tell you how I found these. So this blog right here, we've referenced this one before. This is called ProBlogger.net. These guys are sort of like the premier blog for other bloggers who are wanting to learn how to blog, if that makes sense. So they're in the business of training other bloggers, essentially. So if I had a site that was somehow in that space and I wanted to guest post here, I would want to find ProBlogger's guidelines somewhere. Well, what I did is I hopped onto their website, and a lot of times you can look here in their navigation menu. Maybe you look up here towards the top of their site, right? Maybe it's up here somewhere. Hold on, here's my pen. Maybe it's in the nav menu here where you can learn about guest blogging. Maybe it's here somewhere in this navigation bar, or maybe it's at the footer of the site. Maybe it's at the very, very bottom. Well, I looked and couldn't find it. So what I did was I went to Google and I just simply Googled ProBlogger.net guest post guidelines. And Google found me the page. And it made sense why it was so hidden, because when I found the guidelines for ProBlogger, here's what it says. It says, guidelines and suggestions for guest posts on ProBlogger. Thanks for your interest in writing a guest post for ProBlogger. In 2014, ProBlogger is taking a different approach to the content we publish. That new approach means we can't accept any unsolicited submissions at this time. The strategy may change in the future, but for the moment, we apologize that we can't consider guest post submissions. So in layman's terms, what does that mean for me if I'm wanting to get a guest post onto ProBlogger at this point? I'm probably out of luck, right? I'm probably not getting my guest post on this site. Now, that could change. Obviously, they happen. If you read ProBlogger at all, you'll notice they have guest posts all the time. They may just have their own lineup of guest posters, and they're no longer interested in finding new ones. But if I work to cultivate a relationship with this individual, retweeted their stuff, blogged about them, and maybe make contact with them in the future and shoot an email and say, hey, I know this is your policy, but we'd urge you to consider, here's some of the stuff we've done, so on and so forth, and see if we can get them to consider us. But as of now, it doesn't look like they take any submissions. Okay. Here's another example of a site. I've referenced this site before several times in some of my other trainings. This is called GetRichSlowly.org. This is a personal finance blog. Focuses on investment and budgeting and real estate and insurance, stuff that has to do with personal finance. So if I wanted to guest post here, I went and found their guidelines, and I believe I found this by Googling as well. I just did GetRichSlowly.org, and then I put in guest post guidelines or rules. You can word that a little bit differently, but essentially that's what I put in, and I found this page. And it is long, okay? So it says how to submit a guest post. I'm not going to read all of this, of course, but I'll read a couple of things. It says Get Rich Slowly welcomes compelling guest posts from all sorts of authors. These are a great way to share what you know about money with others so that they can improve their financial situations. Okay. So skipping along, because we received so many guest post submissions, we can't possibly publish them all. To maximize the chances that your guest post will appear at Get Rich Slowly, they have a bunch of guidelines here. And I would urge you to read these closely if you were interested in getting published on Get Rich Slowly. Okay, number one here, write a quote-unquote bloggy style and format. Number two, be original, tell a story, have a point, don't be spammy, cite your sources, leave the politics at home. They don't want political content. Proofread, read your post out loud, think like a reader, use as much space as you need, be willing to take the heat. This one was interesting, as on use as much space as you need. They say here there aren't any length requirements at Get Rich Slowly. Your story should be as long as it needs to be, but no longer. If it's 100 words, that's great. If it's 1,000 words, that's fine too, but be sure every word counts. And I would argue that's pretty good advice for almost any blog post. There are no hard and fast rules on length here. Now, some blogs they'll say, we want a guest post at 750 words, and you'll have to adhere to that. But I would say that's more of the exception rather than the rule. The rule is more of what they're sharing here. But, I share this with you guys here, and if you notice the URL, you can look at these guidelines, because I think these are good guidelines to understand anyway. GetRichSlowly.org/submit/guest-post will take you to this page. If you follow these guidelines on most of your submissions, I can almost guarantee you're going to get accepted to some blogs, because these are really sound. Okay, so it says, when you don't do these things, and I'm reading right here. I know this is small, so I'm just reading it to you. When you don't do these things, we have to do them. But while you're dealing with just one guest post, we're dealing with dozens. As frustrating as it may be to work so hard with one article, imagine what it's like to go through a stack of them. The easier you make things for us, the more likely your article is to appear on the site. Okay, good to know, right? And then you come down here to the very bottom, and they want you to type in your guest post here already. So they want you to put in your content right there in that box. They're basically like, show me what you got. Write an article, make it a good one, follow our guidelines, and hey, there's a good chance you'll actually get onto the site, which is pretty cool if you think about it. Because as we've talked about, if I were in the finance space, let's say I owned a company that was trying to sell a personal finance budgeting software, okay? This would be a prime target for me because of who they are. Well, Get Rich Slowly is a huge site. They're big. They've been in the space for a long time. They have a lot of loyal readers. A link from Get Rich Slowly to my site is going to be worth a tremendous amount of value in Google and help me get higher rankings. This is an absolute must for me. So yes, would I take 2 or 3 hours and put together a really well-written original piece of content just for Get Rich Slowly? Yeah, it'd be well worth it. Well worth it. But these are just examples, guys. All blogs have a bit of a different set of guidelines. This one's a bit more robust. You're going to find blogs that, as you're looking at it, you don't see anything about a guest post. And you're going to just have to go look to find a contact email and send them an email asking them about it. And that's okay, for sure. That is okay. So speaking of the email, we just talked about read the guidelines first. Let's talk about these other items here. So this one right here, personalize your email, no generic greetings. Okay, so if I took you into my email account right now, I'm not going to do it. But if I took you in right now to one of my email accounts that's associated with one of my blogs, I cannot tell you how many emails I get that say something like, "Dear Sir or Madam, comma, we would like to work out a partnership where we guest post on your site. Are you accepting any? If so, blah, 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 blah." Okay? But the minute I see "Dear Sir or Madam," how do I feel at that point as the owner of my site? Do I feel like these people care? Like they didn't even take enough time to look through my content to see who I am and address me by my name. I can almost guarantee I'm going to just skip right over it because I have enough other people when they email me, they address me just as Trevor or Dear Trevor, right? That's true in different business settings as well, right? It's often not appropriate to use the generic form. Rather, find out who you're talking to and address it to that person. You'll have much greater success. Inside your email, you need to tell them who you are. Like, why does it matter? So, I mean, it should be very basic. You address the person, Dear Trevor. Hey, we've been a long time reader of your site. In fact, we found your site 4 years ago and have really loved your material. You can break the ice a little bit by just saying how much you appreciate, some of the things that I've done in this case, right? If you're addressing it to me, and then let them know who you are. Say, hey, I'm actually the owner of financialnut.com, and we've been blogging now for 8 years. And we have a really big following on our site, a loyal following, so on and so forth. We've got X number of likes on Facebook. And we really think that we would be able to add a really nice addition to your blog. Sometimes it even pays to ask them if they're looking for anything, which I've really appreciated. I've had a few people that have solicited me and said, hey, we've noticed that you've got a lot of content, but is there any area in particular that you're needing some content about? If so, do you have any suggestions? Because we would love to cater our content to that. And I might say, yeah, I've actually been looking for somebody who, would write me an article about how to short a stock. And I can give them suggestions as to what to write. But explaining who you are and why that matters is important. And the nice thing about the who you are part, you don't sound so out of the blue if you've actually cultivated a relationship, because they'll know who you are. You say, hey, I'm the owner of financialnut.com. We've retweeted each other's stuff a couple of times, or hey, you mentioned me in a blog post recently, or whatever the case may be. It's cool if you can cite that relationship and just remind them. And sometimes, I know this sounds a little salesy, but sometimes you want to tell them what you've done. You can say, hey, by the way, we've had blog posts published on some pretty big name sites, including CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, so on and so forth. Now, a lot of you guys won't have credentials like that, right? That's okay. Maybe you posted on 2 or 3 other sites that aren't too well known, but you can put a link to them, right? Hey, we've guest posted on this site, and this site. Here's a link to our blog and our e-commerce store, just so you know a little bit about us. We'd love to produce a really great piece of content for you. Now, if you've done your research on the guidelines, maybe they want you to present a piece of content to them. So in that email, you can say, hey, here's what we thought you might like. Here's an article. Let us know what you think. Right? So, I mean, there's no perfect way to do this. I'd love to have you guys test different email approaches, but if you sort of go with this, where you cultivate the relationship, you find out a little bit about their guidelines, you address an email to the actual owner, and then you tell them a little bit about you and what you've done, and then ask them if you can do a guest post. Chances are, if you do this a whole bunch of times on a whole bunch of different blogs, you're going to get a decent number that get back to you. You're not going to get a 100% response rate, but you might get a 40% response rate or a 60% response rate. Sometimes it doesn't matter how good your sales pitch is. You don't get everybody to get back to you. But I can tell you it's going to be a lot better than a 3% response rate, which you might get if you were just soliciting places like crazy using the generic without cultivating a relationship. This works, guys. I'm telling you right now, This absolutely works, but it does take a fair bit of effort. And I can see some of you guys, and you're the wheels are churning in your head, and you're thinking, okay, but I've got all this other stuff I'm doing. How am I going to have time for this? Well, I don't know. Prioritize it. Make time for it. The idea behind marketing here is that we'll say this is your business right here, and your business shouldn't be held up by one or two pillars, right? These are your marketing pillars, So let's say this one right here. This is your SEO pillar, right? And you've got maybe this one is your social media, and maybe you do maybe this is your paid advertising, right? You don't want three pillars. You want a whole bunch of things that you're trying out. Your business should be constructed with a lot of marketing pillars underneath it. And not all of them are going to work. Maybe the paid marketing one in this case didn't work. Well, that's fine, because this structure right here, which is your business, is still going to be held up because it's got a lot more support from other places. This is just another one of those pillars. All right. So I'd encourage you to work it in. Like I said earlier, we may or may not do a fifth part to this series. I think the actual blog post, how to write the post, is something we've talked about before. We could talk about it again, but having done these 4 trainings here, you should be able to execute this strategy well. All right, so to some of your comments that I missed as I've been talking here, and if you do have any questions or comments, please feel free right now to share. Michelle says, I had a blog comment on my site asking me if they could do a guest blog, but I thought it was spam. Yeah, that's a really lazy way to do it, Michelle. If they were serious and they wanted a guest blog on your site, I'd like to think they would at least take the time to email you and do something better than a blog comment. Talk about a low response rate. If they were just mass commenting on blogs asking to do that, I'll bet barely anybody got back to them. Kirk, you say, I've been getting a lot of random calls lately from to my cell phone from different states. When I would answer, there'd be no response, and then I'd get hung up on. Any idea how to get rid of that? That's tough, right? Because I don't know who'd be calling you, to be honest. I think sometimes when you get in the internet marketing space and your contact information has gotten out a couple of times, it gets bought and sold and packaged up to different companies, and it feels like you get called all the time. Apart from getting a different number or actually answering some of those calls and just telling people not to call you back, yeah, I don't know if you have a lot of options there for sure. Cold calling drives me crazy for sure. Russell, you say the blog comments I've gotten are soliciting, trying to get paid for adding content. Yeah, I get a little bit of that too. Blog commenting is lazy. I mean, it can be a good marketing strategy, but it's lazy if they're using that as a way to contact you rather than actually comment on the content of the blog. If I see a comment that doesn't directly actually relate to what's been written about in the blog, I delete it in most cases because it's not something I want there. Oh, Kirk, Danielle says you can download an app that'll block calls like that. Yeah, they're definitely annoying. I hear you. All right, well, I'm still recording here, so I'm going to turn off the recording. If you're seeing this recorded, thanks for coming along. I hope this helped you out.